Hi everyone, my name is Paige Veronda, and I conducted my research project based on anxiety and mental health in college age students. The supervisor on this research project was Dr. Alexander Swan. So, first up is the abstract. Anxiety and other mental health cases are common issues that individuals all over the world face daily. College students have some of the highest numbers of mental health cases that we see throughout the world. This study helped to determine how accurate this truly is and how age and gender affect the outcomes of anxiety cases in 18 to 25-year-old students. By using a simple survey that was created, I was able to determine a few results, which will be discussed shortly. Introduction. So, the hypothesis that I used to base my research off of was if we test the levels of anxiety using the Zung self rating anxiety and depression scales, we will notice more anxiety within individuals who identify as female rather than any other gender. The reasoning for this study was with everything happening in the world, not only with the pandemic, but with all of the stress that has kind of occurred throughout this entire year. I just wanted to see the levels of anxiety that college age students experience on a daily basis. And then some information regarding the study that should be made aware to the audience prior to this presentation was that I only had 77 participants total. I had about 90 to end with, but I had to discard quite a few of the studies only because people didn't answer all the questions. They skipped over a few, and if I would have kept those responses, it would have messed with my results and data for the final project. Objectives. So, what is the significance of research to the public? This research can help the public by determining the areas of mental health that need to be managed in young adults. By doing more research, we can figure out how to properly help young college students manage their anxiety. And since this study is so small, the results may not give us an accurate conclusion on the true levels of anxiety that college students do face, but if we test it with bigger studies and more samples, we might be able to get an accurate conclusion and some accurate data that can help us out. What is the significance of the research to me? So, this is actually significant to me because I struggle with anxiety, and so do many of my other close friends and close peers. And I just want to see how many other students that I don't talk to on a daily basis who may truly deal with mental health issues and all of that stuff. So, I had actually hoped to achieve more insight on mental health in general, not just anxiety and depression, and just gaining a better understanding so that we can truly express to our peers, our professors, and our families on what college students as a whole do go through. Methods. So, there were some research parameters that had to be followed throughout the study. All of the individuals had to be within the age range, so between 18 and 25 years old. They needed to currently be a college student or have recently graduated from some kind of college. And they also needed to fill out certain consent forms prior to taking the study, as well as giving their email at the end of the study if they wanted to be added into the drawing for the gift card. And then some of the methods and designs that were used was obviously the Zung self-rating depression and then the Zung self-rating anxiety scale. And I had actually designed a self-made survey from questions taken from both of those scales, and then I made up the scoring accordingly. So there were 37 questions in this test. The 37 to 61 range was the normal range of anxiety levels. And then the 62 to 86 range was the mild to moderate anxiety levels. The 87 to 111 was the moderate to severe anxiety levels. And then the 112 and above, which it went to 140, were the extreme levels. And so that's kind of how I developed my work and what I based my work off of. But there was also another article titled Depression and Anxiety Among University Students During the COVID-19 Pandemic in Bangladesh, which was a web-based cross-sectional survey. And that was basically what I had looked at throughout my entire research project to get ideas and get a better understanding of how they conducted their research and the results from it. So they had looked at the experiences of home quarantine and lockdowns, which had caused many students to succumb to certain anxious tendencies. And even though it was centered in a different country and it is a huge difference between Bangladesh and the US, it did help a lot to form the basis of my study and to get some better insight and really look at my results and compare them from Bangladesh to the US. And then the other one that I used was the Zung Self-Rating Depression Scale, which was an online questionnaire system based on standard psychometric instruments, and that is what I used for my study. And then the results. So there were a few important results for my study, and my work had turned out kind of how I had expected in more ways than one, but the averages for males and females were fairly equal. So altogether, with the sum of all the scores, the mean of the scores was 84. So these participants typically fell within the mild to moderate anxiety level range. And the highest score that a participant had was a 21-year-old who identified as a male, and his score was 131. And like I said before, the highest you could get to was 140. So he was pretty high up there on the scale. The lowest score was a 21-year-old who identified as a female, and that score was a 43. So she had fallen into the normal range of anxiety. But I had not expected that, and I didn't expect to get a score that high on this test. But at the same time, there was almost double the amount of females who took the survey compared to males. So out of the 77 total participants, 53 of them were females and only 24 of them were males. So this was kind of difficult for me to really get a good understanding of whether or not anxiety is more prominent in females than in any other gender. But I also had a few other people who didn't identify as female or male, and unfortunately I did have to discard their surveys because not all of the questions were answered, and like I said, it would have ruined my end results. And then conclusion. So since I only had 77 participants total, it will be difficult to determine whether or not these results reflect an actual outcome that is accurate. And I had looked at another study titled College Students, Mental Health Problems and Treatment Considerations, and they had specifically stated in part of the article that there also needs to be some consideration that students may have already had anxiety prior to coming to college. So even though the results do say that most individuals had mild to moderate anxiety levels, it needs to be considered that they could have also had these before coming to college and before the whole coronavirus pandemic, and that it is hard to determine whether or not their anxiety is new or if it's been around for a while. And then what does the data suggest from the charts? So for this first chart, there isn't really a lot that we can notice on this. We see that the 18 and 25-year-old age range only has a few participants, and that was due to just not a lot of individuals of that age range taking my test. But we do see that the 21-year-old range gives us more information than the others do. So we notice that most of the dots from the 18 to 25 range do kind of fall towards the middle. So there's not a lot happening above the 120 range or below the 40 range. So a lot of these do fall close to the 80 range, which was what we noticed in our averaging. And then this was the second chart, and this does give us a little bit more information. So the F stands for female, and the M stands for male, and then the ages next to them, the numbers next to them, dictate the age. So F18 is an 18-year-old female, male 18, 18-year-old male, and then so on and so forth. But we do notice a few things. So if you look at the M21, you notice that the average score was a 91.3, which was the highest average between any other gender and age group. So we can kind of assume that males, the age of 21, do have more anxiety than the other age groups. Although it is hard to tell because there weren't many males at the age of 21 that did take the test. So this could just be that the few who did had higher scores than the others. But we also noticed that the female who is 25 had a score of 71, and she was actually, there was only one female at the age of 25, so that was the only score we could base it off of. So it's kind of hard to tell whether or not those scores would be higher or lower just based on how many participants we did have. And then the male 25 had an average of 87, and there were only 2 males at the age of 25 that took this study. So again, they both had a score of 87, and we can't really clarify whether or not that is accurate. But overall, this does help a lot. The mean of all of the female scores ended up being an 85.64. So again, still falling in that mild to moderate range. And then the mean of all of the male scores was an 80.71, which was lower than the females. But as I stated before, they did have more females participating in this study than males. Overall, though, this is a pretty good representation of age range and gender compared to the scores, which is what I wanted to see with my study. And lucky for me, I was able to get some information that could possibly help, but overall, I really do think you'd need many more participants in order to get an accurate representation of the true levels of anxiety and depression in college-age students. And then finally, here are some of the literature and some of the studies that I used within this PowerPoint. And these were the main ones that did help me out throughout my research and throughout all of my data and finding all of my information at the end. So thank you guys so much.